This is the old house at Cote, the childhood home of a prolific but largely forgotten author whose ideas about the natural world are particularly relevant today. James is meeting Mike Pringle, the director of the museum here.
Hello.
Hello, James.
Who lived in this lovely thatched farmhouse?
This was the birthplace and home of Richard Jefferies, a nature writer from Victorian times.
Born in 1848 to farming parents, Richard grew up in what was, at that time, rural Wiltshire, but it was a family tragedy that really spurred his love of nature.
When he was a toddler, his elder sister, when she was 5, she was killed by a horse out on the road. But the impact that had on the parents, of course, was very, very severe. And I think Jefferies was left a bit to his own devices. And luckily for us, I think that's probably what led him to just go off wandering in the countryside and start to develop this passion for nature and the world around him.
What was his education? Surely as a writer he would have been educated.
Although he lived here in sort of rustic Wiltshire, he also spent a lot of time with his very well-to-do aunt nearer London. She gave him a very, very solid education, so he had this constant mix between society, countryside, well-to-do.
So he got his skills from the town and his material from the countryside.
Very good, yes. I think that sums it up nicely.
This education inspired him to pick up a pen, and he would spend hours writing here in this attic room. His first job, aged 17, was at a local newspaper. Then he began writing articles for the Times. And although his subject matter was rural life, he upped sticks from Wiltshire and moved closer to the capital.
Strangely, the further away he moved from Swindon, the more he started to reminisce back to his days here in the countryside. And partly because, of course, the things that was bringing him success were those tales of his country life.
So, rather like Jane Austen or Beatrix Potter, was there a breakthrough book?
There was the gamekeeper at home. He shadowed a local gamekeeper and he poured out lots of fantastic stories, and that became a bestseller.
Many more books followed, all with the overarching theme of nature and mankind's effect upon it. From autobiographical works to what is thought to be the first post-apocalyptic science fiction novel. But perhaps his best-loved work was a tale of children's adventure.
He wrote a book called Bevis, The Story of a Boy, and that's all about adventures out on the lake. And he wrote this almost simultaneously as Mark Twain was writing about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer on the other side of the Atlantic.
How interesting.
So he, Jefferies was sort of doing the same thing over here.
Slightly Swallows and Amazon feel? Or?
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, because Arthur Ransom actually wrote Swallows and Amazons because he'd read Bevis as a child. So it inspired him too.
Sadly, Jefferies' life was cut short. He contracted tuberculosis and his health deteriorated. He became too ill to write, dictating his final works to his wife from his sickbed. Jefferies died in 1887 at the age of 38. His books, once bestsellers, gradually fell out of print and were all but forgotten, but the relevance today of his themes of ecology and conservation mean he's being rediscovered by a new generation of readers.
We're sitting under the mulberry tree. He called this the Tree of Life, and described how he spent his childhood playing under it and then falling in love and ultimately death itself. That's the story of everything that Jefferies wrote about. It was all about the natural world and the cycle of everything.
Yeah.
In a way, what he was writing back then was sort of an early attempt at what we would now call ecology. This is what Jefferies was essentially sort of pulling together for us and saying, look, guys, this is our planet, we're part of it. It's not a different thing. No. It's not something else, something other, and it's up to us to actually make it work for us.
A man with ideas ahead of his time.